Yeah, and being in visual arts is very important in interior design, right?
It is. It is. There is so much of this, and that's kind of what we pride ourselves on too. Is we're a very render-heavy, very visual-heavy design firm.
And I've been seeing this thing on social media that says interior designers are not contractors and contractors are not interior designers. I don't know. This has been popping up on my feed.
the reels.
Yeah.
Me too.
I love stone. Anywhere I can put a stone with beautiful veining, anywhere I can put marble. You should see us walk through stone yards. I think that's my happiest day as a designer, is walking through stone yards.
Oh yeah.
And I am just, my dopamine kicks are so high that day.
You're an artistic person too, I hear. You
Yes.
love oil paintings
Yes.
and an animal lover, which is great.
Yes.
I have a small zoo in my house too.
Oh, I've got a zoo.
And I think a good builder appreciates a designer that asks questions versus a designer that might come into it perceiving like they know what they're talking about. And all of a sudden we're in a sticky mess because, you know, I went somewhere that I shouldn't have gone and I was confident about something I shouldn't have been. I feel like builders really appreciated the fact that I asked questions and I humbled myself and kind of came down to that level.
And you're not gonna know everything 100% of the time, and that's all right. No one does.
No, and even people that have been in the industry for years don't know everything.
Absolutely.
Because of the industry as it goes, that things change so often and so much that, you know, we are all learning every day.
Absolutely, you were so right.
Like a standing bear, or was it sitting?
He was
like
kind of like climbing on a rock.
I was gonna say like halfway. It's
Yeah,
kind of
he
like an inclined.
It was a black bear. He was getting up. I think they called him Jethro.
Did they? He has a name.
I was going to ask you, did he have a name?
Yes.
Because they usually do.
A lot of them do have names.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Design Discussions with Nadine. I am Nadine, and today we're here with Sara Noll and Kaeman Perkins with Farm and City Interiors. How are you guys doing?
We're good. How
We're
are
well. We're well.
I'm
Thanks.
so happy to have you guys here. This is going to be a fun episode, and I want to highlight some of your projects and talk about all things design. So thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
you? Yeah, we're really excited.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about your experience in design, how you got into it, how long you've been a designer, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I started in design about 7 years ago. I actually branched over. I used to do a lot of just general graphic design. That's what I got my degree in. And doing websites for people. I did a lot of like brand marketing and things of that nature. All the while having kind of an actively healthy Instagram for my own house, because I've always had an interest in beautiful interiors and designing to kind of my own style. And then at one point I actually had built a website for a builder. This is kind of where the bridge comes in. And that got to know the said builder. Said builder had a client who had a very similar interior design to mine. And the builder had followed my Instagram, was like, hey, you know, I showed my client your Instagram. Would you be able to help her design her house and do some furniture and stuff like that? So that was kind of my first bridge over. And I think the biggest benefit was that I'd come from this background of the visual arts and showing people, you know, different things through visualizing things, graphic designing things. And so that was kind of the support background going into the interior design world, is I was able to kind of render stuff. I was able to really get those visuals flowing for people. And it ended up being just a beautiful marriage. I never left it. I did a house for one client, and the builder was like, hey, can you do a kitchen rendering mock-up for my next client? And so, so I just kept going with, helping people visualize things digitally, and I grew from there, and I kind of shadowed that builder for a couple of years, very humbly. And so then it leads to here.
That's great. Yeah, and being in visual arts is very important in interior design, right?
It is. It is. There is so much of this, and that's kind of what we pride ourselves on too. Is we're a very render-heavy, very visual-heavy design firm, and so basically anything you see design-wise, you're going to see on paper, or however it'll be in our office on a big screen. You're going to see it before it happens. So visual arts kind of growing into that huge in terms of design and kind of conveying elements.
Yeah. So I started design officially in 2020, and then we started working together in 2021. But I mean, my whole life I've been knee deep in construction. My dad has done heavy civil construction for 25 years. And so I grew up, you know, being around that, listening to that, learning the terminology, you know, and so it's really nice for me to be able to kind of carry that from when I was growing up over, because it gives me a really solid foundation on the actual physical building aspect of everything.
Yeah, and that's very important because, of course, going from in designing to then knowing what's going on in the construction phase is pretty important. And I've been seeing this thing on social media that says interior designers are not contractors and contractors are not interior designers. I don't know. This has been popping up on my feed.
On the reels?
Yeah,
Me too.
Sure.
So many times, and I'm like, okay, I get that. So that goes to that point where you having that background is very helpful.
Yeah, it
So you
gives
have
me,
that eye.
it gives me a little bit. My grandfather also built homes his whole life. And so, having those two male figures, showing me things and teaching me things growing up, I've kind of been able to take that and carry it with me.
Okay. And you're an artistic person too, I hear. You love
Yes.
oil paintings
Yes.
and an animal lover, which is great. I have a
Yes.
small zoo in my house too.
Oh, I've got a zoo. But I really do love oil painting. We did a project, a lodge, a few years ago, and I ended up doing 10 oil on aluminum panel paintings for this project.
Wow.
And it was so much fun. And it's just, you pour so much of yourself into it. It was really nice to leave that there.
That's great. And Sarah, you have a bit of an Italian connection, right? You
Yes.
visited there frequently. Tell us about that.
It all started back in college, and I went on a 2.5 week tour of Italy. Kind of from the very top of it, started in Milan. We went all the way through kind of a lot of Italian cities. And so inspired by Italian design in general. I think it is a very healthy vein that I still carry today, especially in designing my own house. Italian design really is a good mix of kind of rustic, old architectural elements, but also kind of coupled with these beautiful, modern, timeless silhouettes. Always think about the white marble and how beautiful that is kind of on the background of Italy. I love stone. Anywhere I can put a stone with beautiful veining, anywhere I can put marble. You should see us walk through stone yards. I think that's my happiest day as a designer, is walking through stone yards.
Oh, yeah.
And I am just, my dopamine kicks are so high that day. But it really did originate in Italy. They use a ton of beautiful stone. I mean, it's just breathtaking. There's no other way to describe it other than seeing it in person. But again, against a really rustic, old architectural style. There's just so many things about Italy I fell in love with while I was there. And I try to stay on kind of the forefront of their other design stuff and some of their other design brands outside of the U.S. There's so many good product offerings from Italy, like we were talking about.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Like Bertozone is one of them as far as appliances go. That's amazing. And as I mentioned, I'll be going to Milano next week for the Salone del Mobile show, and I highly recommend going to that if you can too at some point. It's amazing.
We would love to.
We would love to.
Yeah,
we would love
next
to.
year we can go together.
I'm telling you, I'm so jealous you're going to that. I mean, just being there is in the mecca of just beautiful design and seeing all these things that are so far from, another thing we talked about as well is, so there's so many offerings for our industries, and I feel like we see such a small amount of them.
Yeah.
And I think being there, especially in the design mecca of the world, how lovely. I'm going to be following along on your channel to see how that goes myself.
That's good. No, and I love that. And then getting back to the design, so you guys have a bit of a rustic design when it comes to your interiors. So let's talk about that and how you gravitated towards that specific. Is it just something that you loved or you kind of fell into it, or is it the area of town that you mostly work in or your clients? So let's talk about that.
So whenever I founded Farm & City, I guess a little bit of background about me. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, very, very small town in Texas called Ranger. And there isn't a whole lot there, but I was an outdoors girl. I mean, I grew up, it's funny because now I'm today and I'm put together, but I was a tomboy who was never wanted to be inside. I always joke with my parents, if they would have let me live in my treehouse, I would have. I just always fell in love with nature. It was kind of, just where I found myself. And there's so much of our style now that sings about organically showing off the natural in the indoors. I love a big, wood-grained anything. I think we talked about this a little earlier too. Anything to do with beams and kind of bringing those indoor elements in. And in general, what happened was, so I grew up, like I said, the middle of nowhere. I met my husband in college, who is a city boy, who brought me into Houston. And so there's so much of me, and I kind of talked about too when I first got started. I had Instagram, and it was about how I really bring that style that I have organically to myself into an interior that's in the middle of the city. And I just found my groove in kind of coupling these spaces that have these organic elements, that are more rustic, but also kind of leaning them towards just being traditional.
Yeah.
And being able to flow anywhere and not feeling overly rustic. I think rustic has these negative connotations that we think of like
everybody thinks like huge, chunky, and it doesn't
and
have to be that.
outdated. You know, I think because rustic did have a good go, but I think rustic can be timeless in itself.
Yeah.
And you can mix it with that little bit more traditional or transitional or even modern and bring the two together and make it beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we just finished a beautiful modern rustic barn dough out in Caldwell.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it kind of tones down, bringing in those modern elements. Again, like that's me. I love a big rustic backdrop, and then we have this white marble that is classic, timeless, modern, kind of over it. And that's really my niche, is bringing in those things. Because I think, you know, I live in this time where a lot of us know, like our predecessors that were agricultural-based farmers. I get a lot of clients who like, oh, you know, we came from a farm family. There's beautiful, fond memories on a farm, on a ranch. We get a lot of clients who still actively live on one. But I think people think that those two worlds can't intertwine. The city, the modern, the beautiful, the elevatedness, and as well as living a little more rural. And that's kind of where we come in. We're kind of the cross intersection of both of those.
And I think your Joseph project that we'll highlight here is a very good example of that.
Yes.
You have the waterfall edge on the island in the kitchen, very beautiful in the bathroom, freestanding tub. So let's talk a little bit about that project, and we can show everybody how beautiful it is, and you know, what was the inspiration behind that, where was it located, and let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So we started planning this project with this client, I think the day they closed on their property.
Yes.
And initial
so before concrete's even poured.
Yeah, before concrete's poured, they just got the plans back from the architect and came to our office and was like, hey, before we redline this, what would you do? And it was so awesome to get started and come in that early.
Definitely.
And I think that definitely benefited the overall design, because we were able to plan for things that had to be done during framing.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
And one of the things I had mentioned earlier is we're really rendering heavy. We do our own renderings in-house. So someone brings us the floor plan like that nature, I'm literally 1 or 2 days later, we're walking through it. We have we have an actual studio, and we have a huge screen that we walk everyone through their houses a little bit. So we were able to, again, like they were right off the excitement of getting ready to go. And I was like, let's go. 3 days later, we're walking their blueprint with them to make sure that they're happy with everything. Of course, their house is a shell at that point, but just making sure they like their clearances, making sure they like the flow of everything. But then it was kind of from a design standpoint. This client, especially another stone lover like myself, wanted to highlight stone in a lot of different places and a lot of beautiful, intricate tile work. And so we knew that going into it, but then also it's on acreage. This house is on at least 10 acres, if not more. But it's a farmstead. You know, they kind of consider it their own little family ranch, and so they wanted to have a nod to that, and that's where we get a lot of these beautiful wood elements that are in this house.
Yep.
And it kind of tones down. You know, it tones down the modern when you bring in a bunch of wood grain for the ceiling, through the floors, through a bunch of different elements. Through the cabinets. They had beautiful stained white oak cabinets. It tones down the modern a little bit, and it made such a beautiful bespoke place that really speaks them. We flew out to markets, which, so High Point Market, we go out there every season, and we're looking at new lights. So a lot of the stuff that you see there, even their lighting is like first production run lighting stuff. Yeah, they really wanted something that was...
Even their furniture. I mean, even some of their furniture
was
just
first production run.
Released, and we ordered it. I think it got released in October. We ordered it in October, kind of thing. And so
that's the importance of going to High Point Market, because in this industry, things change all the time, and new things are coming out all the time. So you have to stay on top of those things.
You do, you do. Especially for the kind of clients that we get that want something just totally different. But then also, they don't want to have to sacrifice. You know, they want to make sure whatever they're getting, if it's different, if it's new, it's good quality, and that's why we're going out to market and we're looking at those types of things. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that you saw was kind of first production run of lighting. They wanted something, like I said, they wanted something they'd never seen before. Totally different. It's not one that we could gather from Pinterest boards. You know what I mean? There was so much of this house that we just organically designed, knowing them, knowing their kind of their stylistic preferences, talking them through livability. They also have small children, so we kind of talk through, hey, what can we do here? You know, for a good example is the stone in their kitchen is actually dolomite. It looks like a high-end marble, but dolomite has, you know, it's a little bit more resistant for wear and tear. So if you get little kids, for example, that touch your waterfall island, it's a great fit. And it also has a lot of beautiful veining.
Yeah, because marble is beautiful. We all love it, but there's a lot of upkeep, and you know, when you have little kids, it might not be the first choice that you should choose, right? Unless you're really adamant about it.
Yeah, you've got to be the right kind of person with the right kind of lifestyle to have marble in your kitchen, I think.
Right. So these clients come to me, and I already know they have this beautiful, impeccable stone taste like myself. Yeah. Again, loving marble and the look of marble. So we did a lot of searching for those stones. Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest part of our projects, was really just sourcing the right stone.
Yeah, a lot of legwork on the stone. I think we went to like 6 or 8 different stone yard trips just to find what was perfect.
Right. Wow. And every single vantage of that house and the way it turned out, we rendered prior to. So we knew the beauty was coming, and it was working with them. It's actually the great thing about them, they're actually a self-build because they have a contractor background themselves. Yeah. Okay. So, and going into it with a self-build client like that, there's so many things that you get scared of and you think of, but they did amazing. You know, they, like I said, they worked more in commercial construction themselves, and so they kind of knew the legways of construction. But yeah, we were kind of there to really do all the design elements and all the selections, and I think it turned out really great.
And how long did that project take for the design process?
So we started rendering in, what was it, March?
I want to say March,
April. Mm-hmm. And then I think they started building June.
Yeah, I think June.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah,
that's pretty quick.
Yeah. So, and by the time that they were done building, started building rather, excuse me. By the time they started building, a lot of the big spaces were done. But like Kaeman said, the framing, there's so many things about framing that were in the designs, you know, when you
the recessed beams in the ceiling. You can't just do that. It has to be planned for.
We had to get that all figured out prior to framing. And so, so we had done a lot of those things.
Yeah, and I think like I hear a lot, you know, on the internet and from other designers and other builders, it benefits you greatly by having a designer as early in the project as you can get them, and the Joseph project really shows that.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes.
In construction, I agree. I totally agree with that too. Yeah, that's amazing. So now, after we talked about your project, I want to talk about any advice that you might want to give new designers, and what steps do you think that they should take to, you know, get themselves out there, you know, as designers yourselves. I'm sure there might even be things you would think, well, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was starting out.
Sure. I have mine. I know, Kaeman, I'll go first if that's okay. I think my biggest thing is getting started was to humble myself. Like I told you, I worked under a builder, just kind of being shadowed by them for at least over a year and a half. And I wanted to be on site for every little thing, and I wanted to learn the construction process a little bit more, kind of transitioning over from furnishings and decorations. And I think just being humble in the very beginning and being a sponge and being absorbent, not being afraid to ask questions, because I was totally that designer that asked a million questions in the beginning to familiarize myself. Mm-hmm. And I think a good builder appreciates a designer that asks questions versus a designer that might come into it perceiving like they know what they're talking about. And all of a sudden we're in a sticky mess because, you know, I went somewhere that I shouldn't have gone and I was confident about something I shouldn't have been. I feel like builders really appreciated the fact that I asked questions and I humbled myself and kind of came down to that level. So I think for new designers, I think finding a good builder that's going to take you under their wing a little bit, builder, contractor, wherever you may find, find someone like that, humble yourself with them, ask a ton of questions, familiarize yourself with the construction process so you may be a bigger value add to that client down the road. I think that's a big one for me, just in general, was that time where I was kind of a fledgling learning all of those types of things.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And then for me, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, be around, ask people. You know, sometimes you do have to go to that job site twice a day. And when you're there, look at everything, make a list, you know. If you have a question about, you know, hey, why is the contractor doing this? Ask. I mean, worst case, they're not going to want to tell you, but that's okay. At least you'll learn. At least, you know, you give yourself an opportunity to do better next time. And I think that's really important.
That's good, and you're right, because a lot of people don't want to ask the questions. They might feel like, oh, I should know what I'm doing. I should know what I'm looking at, and it's almost like, it's a self-esteem thing too.
Yeah, and you're not going to know everything 100% of the time, and that's all right. No one does.
No, and even people that have been in the industry for years don't know everything.
Absolutely.
Because of the industry as it goes, that things change so often and so much that, we are all learning every day.
Absolutely. You are so right. I could not have said it better myself. Yes.
And it's like every contractor does it differently too. So, I mean, you may know how contractor A does it, but if contractor B does it differently, you're not going to know unless you ask.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely
And I think
right.
the only other leg to this that I can think of in terms of just being a new designer and getting your approach is, we talked about this before as well, is just bandwidthing yourself. One of the things that we do as a design firm ourselves is we bandwidth the number of clients that we take on at a certain point. And it's funny because you run into these design projects as a young fledgling. I want all the projects I can get. You know what I mean? I want them all. I can do them all. I can stay up all night and I can do all the things. And I've just learned that bandwidthing myself, just more so for everyday day-to-day communication. It was the things that I didn't think I needed bandwidth for that I ended up greatly needing it for, and being the reason I can't take on more than 3 or 4 projects at a time. Even now that I'm matured in this, I like to bandwidth myself to 3 or 4 different projects because I got to be free for the contractor who calls me every day, who needs the decision today. There's a lot of it that's very time sensitive in what we do, and they need us. They need us at that moment. And then also just in terms of creativity, being a creative in this, I need white space. I always tell Kaeman, let's white space this weekend, because, a lot of different industries do their work on a computer. My computer really is my brain for so much of this.
Right.
And I've got to rest it.
Yeah, and a lot of, I think too, because we talked about this, like when you're in people's homes, the dynamic kind of shifts a little bit.
Right.
And, the communication lines get a little bit blurred. Like you're not going to call your bank on weekends or anything like that. And when you're in somebody's home, that does kind of flex. And so be understanding and graceful, but also, you have a life, your time matters, and you need to value yourself too.
Setting boundaries as a new designer.
I am 100% with that too, in what I do as well. You want to, and I started out too, wanting to answer everybody right away and all of that. But sometimes you have to have the boundaries and the cutoff somewhere.
Absolutely.
For your own mental health and your personal peace.
And for me, what works is like setting time aside every day. This is when I'm going to respond to emails, and not really moving from that, because then I am consistent and I give myself an opportunity to be.
And set those boundaries early so the client knows them. At the very beginning of a project, kind of talk those over and say, hey, it's not personal if I don't answer you after 6 p.m. or whatever your number is.
Yeah, right.
And that way you don't have to feel like you're hurting feelings. I think you make a great point. It's like and as a young fledgling designer, you might feel like you're not doing well or hurting someone's feelings, not answering them. But really what you're doing is you're gaining your best work self.
Yeah.
By having that boundary.
And your best everything self too, because you can't be everybody at home when you're still working.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was gonna make that point too, that you can be a better designer, or for me, contractor, if you have the brain rest that you need, and you can come back the next day and be fresh, and it's really important.
Yeah. And seasons in my life where I can say I wasn't getting that, it was hard, and I had to always get back to it.
Yeah.
So definitely.
I think we all have.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
All right, so let's move into, what would you think is your biggest challenge in what you do, and how do you overcome that?
I think the biggest thing is client communication. I think whenever we see any kind of hiccups or hindrances on a project, it has to do with communication via client. Typically, we're able to navigate those waters pretty well. We kind of pride ourselves on being good communicators every step of the way. But I think just setting expectations from the very beginning. We have an onboarding process we do with new clients that kind of just helps them know what's coming next. There's a big thing about interior design. It feels so behind the veil. People come in with a lot of questions. I mean, even just to reach out to us for a quote, I feel like people are apprehensive. Because there isn't a lot of knowledge known about, what is this going to cost? What does this service look like? What does this include?
I think to a lot of people coming in, it feels very secretive, and it doesn't have to be.
Right.
We try to be as transparent as possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that our existing clients would say about us is, through being overly communicative, being an advocate for budgets. I think that's another thing too. People get so scared of trusting budgets with people, interior designers. But we're very much an advocate for our client's budget and just getting them the biggest yield for whatever investment we're
and just the
targeted
client
at.
in general. You know, even there are times where you may have a good relationship with a contractor, but the contractor is not doing work that you expect, and just being comfortable enough to say, hey, like this isn't what we're gonna do, and this isn't our quality of work, and we know that you do better.
Yeah.
Really good.
And being an advocate for a client the whole time. And I think that's one thing, again, like why we manage our bandwidth is because we're at these job sites every day. And whenever we tell a contractor, hey, this is subpar, it comes from a place of them knowing that we're in this together for this client versus being someone who only shows up every now and then.
I feel like you have more credibility when you're there more often.
Oh, absolutely. And it's better for everybody.
And you notice
Right?
things, you know, if you're only coming to a job site once, twice a month, you're not going to see something that got like a mistake that got made one day. You know, it's going to get covered up by other things. And so if you're just there and you say, hey, it's a lot easier to catch it then.
Right.
Absolutely. And then you don't want the client to come back 2 weeks later and be like, oh, this wasn't right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because somebody didn't see it, and then it's a bigger process to have to fix it.
And now our wall is sealed closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That puts you in a predicament.
Yeah, not a good idea.
But yeah, in terms of challenges, just communication, being open, communicative wise. One of the things that we start our onboarding process with a new client is we have a disclaimer like, hey, open communication, transparent communication. We don't build these designs with this emotional tie to them for ourselves. It's not self-gratifying when I design a space for you. It is to provide a space for yourself and for you, to serve you. So I think open communication, you know, your loves, things you love about this are just as important as the things you don't like about them. I want to know what you don't like about this. Tell me the nitty-gritties, because that's going to get us to the best communication place in terms of designing a space that's really good for you.
Yeah, and what I like to tell people is, yes, I'm designing it. Yes, it's my design, but you're going to be the one living in it.
Yeah.
So if you don't like something, we need to talk about it so that we can change it.
So on that same note, let's talk a little about bespoke design and how do you, in your firm, bring that to people and bring them their best design, starting from scratch, or even in a renovation, you know, probably it's very important. So how do you guys go about bringing that to people?
So that's one of the processes in what we do is really creating a design that's just bespoke for you. We're not really a copy and paste from something else you've seen kind of firm. And so what I'll do is we'll get with a client and we'll kind of ask them some of their preferences. I like to dig a little bit deeper than just send me a couple images of what you like, even though that's a great starting process. That's a great starting point. But I like to, you know, a lot of times clients will come to me without the vocabulary to really tell me their stylistic views. They don't kind of know the tactile elements and, you know, all the different things as a designer that, you know, I've had the experience of learning. So we'll start with the most basic mediums of like, where do you like to vacation?
What do you enjoy?
You know,
Hobbies, right?
Yeah,
Hobbies.
what's your favorite color, you know, and then we can kind of pull that through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good creative person, a good designer is going to be able to take those little anchors and, you know, I love to go to the beach, or we're mountain people, and you know, even I've had people even send me, you know, sometimes whenever we're struggling to get a bespoke design going, they walked into a boot store once. Because I get a lot of the rugged rural clients, but it was a high-end boot store, and they're like, this right here. And
This accent table we love.
This accent table we love in this, you know, it's funny the little things that stick out to you. It doesn't have to be, you know, like I said, it doesn't have to be on a Pinterest board that's for a house. Tell me something that excites you that's maybe a little bit off of the grid. Another example is as we do a lot of man caves, we do a lot of secondary houses. We're wrapping up a man cave right now that's it's a secondary house with a man cave and a garage element to it. But some of the designs came from sports cars, of loving this element of a sports car here, and how do we tie that into design? And there's a way to do it with every visual art element. There's a tieable to interior design if it speaks to you to that extent. And so I think just taking time to kind of you know, really explore within yourself, really explore your surroundings. Where do you like to be when it's your time to white space? When it's your time to just enjoy yourself? Where do you like to be?
What helps you relax? You know,
because at the end of the day, that's a space I want to create for you, a space of visual relaxation. And so that's a big part of our processes. And before we dial in and do a design plan on a rendering or anything like that, we're getting into the nitty gritty of preferences and really helping these people find a space that they really didn't, they knew they wanted, but they couldn't verse
And
what
they couldn't bring it to life. Let's talk about the story about the pub chairs
Yes.
that you told me about earlier, because that's an
Yes.
interesting story. And
Yes.
that's the same thing on this topic about, bringing something, that somebody had a personal feeling about, and how you tried to help them with
Yes.
that.
Yeah. So this client, big car guy. So his whole, office was around viewing his custom car or his classic car collection. And from the start, he was like, my grandfather had these really old saloon chairs when I was growing up, and I loved them. And I have a table. I really just want to see if we can find 4 of these chairs. So we went Marketplace, Round Top. And we'd see, if you're walking through Round Top, you'll see 1 or 2. And I may have, during this project, fallen in love with those chairs, and I have some of my own now. But we
those onesie twosies that didn't have a collection
Yeah.
before that we needed.
it's in my collection. So we looked, and we got to the point of having some shipped in from New York
As an option.
as
yeah.
an option to get, because these were really important to him. They were very sentimental.
Right.
And I was on Marketplace one day at like 2 a.m. and there was a set of 5, mint condition in spring. And I pulled the trigger on it, and we picked them up. We had them, they didn't need to be refinished, but we do have an upholsterer out of Houston, and he was able to add leather to these seats because the seats popped out. And we installed them, and they loved them. And, even his wife came in and was like, these chairs were so important to him. And, just finding out, hey, client, what's important to you? What do you love? What is something that brings that sentimental element back? And let's put it in your home. Let's do it. And I think that doing that creates something that somebody really loves, and they really enjoy every time that they see it.
Yeah.
That search is some dedication for you guys
We
to
looked
do
under
that.
every rock for those chairs. I
Yep.
think we told you we went to Round Top, and there was a vendor who had them at the front of her booth.
She was just sitting playing cards on these
And
chairs that we wanted so
for
bad.
months, we've searched for these things, and I go up to her and I'm like, okay, these are it. I'm like, you have just made a customer. I am going to buy these chairs. And she said, these actually aren't for sale.
So
These are what I bring to. I bring these to every show. I love them, but they're not for sale.
Yeah, so we collected ourselves. We went outside. We got some courage. We came back in, and we tried to buy them again.
Groveled.
Yeah.
Groveled for
we
these
know
chairs.
that you said
We
you
know
love
you
them.
like
Can we
them,
please have
but
them?
we really need them. And she just
Nope.
wouldn't let them go. So, but the things we do that really strike impacts with clients.
Yeah.
And this was one of those things we knew was going to be a non-negotiable, needed to be in the design. So yeah, we're looking under every rock for them. Luckily, we found some on one of those that just sit on Marketplace, because we're not too proud to look on Marketplace or something like that.
I messaged the lady who was selling them. I went to her house to pick them up with my husband. And I was like, where did you get these? She goes, oh, I found them. Some guy had them for sale out of his house in Corpus Christi or something like that. Because I've just kept them. I was going to do something with them, but we're moving, and now I'm going to get rid of them. I listed them like an hour before you messaged me, and I was like, that algorithm, it had to have heard us talking about them or
That
me
phone was
looking
listening to you.
And I think it's funny because I think this kind of loops off of a fear of interior designers that people think we're only going for the highest of the, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna, but no, we are not too proud. If it's an antique or something like that we need, Marketplace, we will walk those trade shows for it.
I'll refinish it.
We've
been there.
We've been there. When you need those secondhand heirloom-esque pieces, we will, we'll go to whatever heights we need to find them.
Yeah, and in some scenarios and some things are just so important to the client.
Right.
And it'll make the project for both you and them.
Right.
Do it.
Right.
Go. It's not about tying back into what you said earlier about something for a new designer. Go the extra mile. It's going to pay off.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It may be hard work right now, but down the line, you're going to be really proud that you did that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many rabbit holes I've fallen down for one element or another, but they're so worth it.
And clients love that, and they see it too. And then that definitely will give them, return clients for you, and then also referrals. When you can, and if you honestly truly love it and you want to make the client happy, it comes through.
They're going to feel it. Yeah.
I try to always think that their space this is one of the biggest investments they're going to make, when they're building a custom home or they're renovating. And I try to take that very seriously in terms of, what we can provide for them. And like I said, I try to be the biggest advocate for their budget. And I think that just kind of segues into it.
You know, someone's trusting you with their nest egg or, you know, their biggest investment they're probably ever going to make.
Right.
And to be trusted with that is kind of an honor.
It is,
you know,
for sure.
And you need to handle it that way.
For sure. Absolutely.
I agree. Now let's move on to my final question
Sure.
that I ask everybody.
Sure.
There's a funny story that you might have
Sure.
that you can share with everybody.
So the only thing that comes to mind is that being more rural, we have to design spaces sometimes around unique objects,
Yep.
interesting objects. For example, I have designed a living room around a taxidermied bear.
Yep.
Said bear was in the equation before concrete was laid.
Yeah, I think that like the original plan for this house, they had built-in cabinets on either side of the fireplace.
They did.
They got rid of them.
For the
That
bear.
bear had a spot.
Okay, so he had a home.
For the bear. The bear had to be homed. Which if you've ever seen a taxidermy bear, they take up a
huge.
good footprint.
They're big.
And they're on wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah, they take up a good footprint. And this bear needed to be front and center.
Was it like a standing bear
It
or
was
was
a-
it sitting?
He was
like
kind of like climbing on a rock.
I was gonna say like
Oh.
halfway. It was
Yeah,
kind of
he
like
was-
an inclined.
It was a black bear. He was getting up. I think they called him Jethro.
Did they?
Yeah, he had a name.
I was going to ask you, did he have a name?
Yes.
Because they usually do.
A lot of them do have names. But that one, yeah, Jethro. There you
Jethro the
go.
bear.
That memory.
And it was also, it's funny as a designer, if that's your origin point too, is like, we want this beautiful, bespoke again,
Yeah.
modern
Mhm.
interior, and here's this bear to design this modern interior around. So we ended up pulling it off. It was a beautiful home.
Yeah, and I mean,
it
now that
worked.
you-
Jethro totally had a spot, and he didn't take away from the design.
Well, now that you say that, we've also designed around a table that had giraffe legs.
Yes.
Like actual
Yes.
Yes,
ones?
that had to be in the design was non-comparable.
Yep.
Yeah, so another interesting element. And then again, you know, how do they bring these things in and you have to design around them.
You've got to roll with it.
You've got to
Yeah.
roll with it. And it's an emotional anchor at some point.
Yeah.
Again, another space, very well executed. We're able to make it work.
And that space, all the furniture that they had already had was like drilled into the floor. Like nothing was moving.
Yeah, it was
Oh.
it was a hunting lodge. So it was a secondary home.
Okay.
We do some hunting lodges and stuff like that. But for said hunting lodge, they did have some table with giraffe legs on it. That was
An ostrich. The ostrich was there.
yeah, a taxidermied ostrich.
So I mean, out in like Wall or Caldwell, College Station, you get a lot of. You just got to roll around the taxidermy.
Yeah,
You know, that's kind of the name of the game out there.
and I think the biggest thing to those, especially as a designer, is if something really just is non-comparable staying in the design. Don't you have to like Kaeman
Don't
said,
just
you have to
run
roll
from
with
it,
it.
yeah.
Don't run from it. Let's roll with it. How do we soften the space so that this doesn't feel super out of place, but then also tie it in.
Yeah, just work on quieting that element that you
Exactly.
don't love. And
Exactly.
it's okay.
Exactly.
Work outside of the box on
Work
that
outside
one.
the
Yeah, you
box.
really have to when it comes to those things
Yeah.
to make it really luxurious and beautiful looking, and then work in these animals.
Yeah, absolutely. we did and I think another one is just kind of animal related was we did a set of kennels.
Yep, that was cool.
Yeah, that was really cool for a lady in Cyprus. Kind of right in her entryway, the most beautiful, grand animal kennels there
And you
are.
wouldn't even notice it. I mean, if you walked by, like her office is in the front part of her house, you could walk by and not know that there are dog kennels in there.
Yeah, so it's like a 15-foot wall of built-ins with, and the tops are kind of, just like Kaeman said, you can't really notice
Yeah.
it. The top's white oak, and it has beautiful dog kennels underneath them.
I think it's urbane bronze or iron ore. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
And
the
then we
pink color.
pulled like the rails
Mhm.
from her stairs.
Oh yeah, and we
as-
tied them in as balusters.
bars.
Oh, I'm sure you love stuff like that, being
I
that you're
do.
an animal lover.
I do. She's got like these big dogs, and I've got big dogs too. And so it was so easy to kind of just, okay, like let's kind of plan for your dogs. They're about the same size, and it was like this client is just a big animal lover, and so we kind of roll pretty good together.
That's good.
Yeah, Kaeman and all the animal lovers get along. She's actually my dog whisperer.
Yeah.
And there's a dog on site.
Any dog on the
Immediately
job
loves
site will
Kaeman.
come find me, and we're best friends,
Yeah.
and I love it.
That's good. You can mesh well with clients that have lots of animals.
Absolutely.
Well,
That's
like a lot of times, the dog will come up to you and it'll roll on you or whatever. And like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, I'm eating it up. It's okay.
Yeah.
Kaeman's all
I love
about
this.
it. And it's funny because all of this rolls back into bespoke interiors too. Is I think people are so afraid to design a space that incorporates the elements like their beloved dogs, and they think if there's some way that's going to take away from the beauty of it. If it has this kind of dog element or animal
Yeah.
element or anything, even kid related, I'm so scared to design it. Let's compromise on the design because of X. And I do think that, you know, with a good design team behind you, there's a way to make X look beautiful, whatever X may be, whether that's your dogs, whether that's, you know, just the kids that are always around. We can still have this beautiful, elevated, custom look in your fully executed design.
Yeah.
And without, you know, without having to sacrifice or feel like you're sacrificing.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, in my own home, I've got, I love ducks. And I've got wood ducks, I've got brass ducks, and you would never know. I mean, my husband and I went to a store the other day, and he pointed out a brass duck, and he was like, I should get this for you. Do you want it? And I was like, we have that already.
And she makes it look great.
And you wouldn't see it. I mean, he lives there. He's lived there for a year. He's never noticed.
Wow. She's hiding all the little ducks.
Yeah. But, you know, it's important to bring it, you know, I enjoy it. Let's take stuff that you enjoy and put it in your home. And when you're doing dishes or looking at your shelves, you're smiling a little bit. And
Yeah, make it for a space you'll really love with the things that you love. That's important.
Right. We get a lot of clients who like will have the more outdoorsman, for example, husband and the wife who's so afraid to bring anything outdoorsy into the space. And I feel like that's a lot of our niche clients that we get because we embrace the outdoors a little bit and the modern. But it's, you know, you can make those things work. If you have a good design team behind you, if you bring them on early in the project, you're able to kind of incorporate those elements in a very well executed way where husband loves it, wife loves it, and it looks very well done and still looks elevated.
That's good. Well, you guys do beautiful work.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. This was fun.
Of course.
yeah, thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely. We have to do this again.
Yes, let's do it.
Sure. Well, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the next one. Bye.
Bye.